Fight!
What is going on, everybody? Welcome back to Fighting with Numbers. This is episode 38, previewing UFC Winnipeg. We go to the up north, if you know what I'm talking about. Last week in Miami, MIA, UFC 327, the model went 7-2-1. Not too bad if you're keeping track at home. That was a big week for the model. That's the kind of week that reminds you why we trust the process and we let the numbers do the talking. We let the numbers do the fighting here on Fighting with Numbers. You see, uh, one push, that's fine. It was a draw. It is what it is. The model was actually correct with the original read of the scorecards, but that's okay. We get the push. 2 losses and 7 wins. So we'll take that every single time, especially on such a big data heavy card. Modeling 10 fights is no easy task for the model. It's nice to come out of it so well. Overall on the year, we now sit at 45, 18, and 6. By the way, if anyone's checked out the web app, I'm not sure why my draws are up at 3. There's something wrong in the back end. It's all good, though. That's 71.43% wins, losses. So we're still humming along right where we want to be. We're about 11 events in for the year. It's mid-April. The model is holding down the fort for us. This week, as I mentioned, the UFC heads to Winnipeg for a much shorter card for us. It is headlined by Gilbert Burns and Mike Malott. Not a bad fight, but the card itself just isn't very data heavy. It's going to be a much shorter card for us. Not a ton of fights to break down. To be honest, like I said, last week we had 10. This week, let's just say we don't have that many. And there's not a lot of edges there either. So I'm actually going to use a little bit of the extra time today to do something I've been meaning to do for a while, and this kind of provides that opportunity. But it's a bit of a refresher for listeners. I don't think I've done this since like the early first few episodes. So any new listeners, welcome. What's up? Thank you for checking this out. But I'm going to pull back the curtain a little bit. I've been getting a lot of questions on social media, but pull the curtain back on how the model kind of works and things I look at, and how it grades fighters, what the tiers mean. I've got a couple questions about the tiers. I apologize. There's not a lot of explaining on that. But it also want to walk you guys through how I'm making these decisions from week to week. I mean, you kind of hear my process anyways and my thought process and why I'm betting what I'm betting, if I'm betting it. But I still kind of want to give this peek as I look at the numbers, because if you've been listening for a while, you hear me throw things around like live dog. Maybe I said trap favorite, and show those are terms, and you probably understand what I mean on the surface. But I want to dig in deeper, and you might hear me say XR percentages and win probability percentages. I want to make sure everyone is on the same page on what all that actually means. So I do want to say I appreciate those of you who have reached out to check out the web app, the web app interface. I hope it's been helpful. I think I know a couple of people have said it's really easy to look at and just kind of boom boom see what I'm on, what I'm fading. So thank you for the kind words. I appreciate new subscribers. I appreciate people reaching out and loving the pod. So that's why I'm going to keep going, because this is just a project of love. Yeah, so I appreciate the kind of words, but it's always cool to connect and nerd out over some UFC stats and UFC betting. So props to you guys for just dealing with me. But thank you again. So first, your weekly reminder, of course, I am Rob Moreno, aka Bobby Knuckles, aka the Robio. You can find me across all social medias at the Robio. Links always in the description. I will try to remember that. And full model breakdowns and written reports will be live at fightnumbers.substack.com. There is no First Strike this week. If you're also someone who follows that show over at VSiN, my co-host Dave Ross is on vacation, so I'm taking a week off from that show as well. But I don't miss here on Fighting with Numbers because this is my child. This is my baby. So how about we open the hood and check what's under the engine here? How the model works. So you're curious. So you'll want to be a data modeler. You don't. It's very nerdy stuff. It's a lot of numbers. I myself find it boring at times. If it wasn't related to fighting, I don't know if I'd find this as interesting. But let's talk about what's behind the engine, right? The Fighting with Numbers model, or, back in the day, I was just calling it the model. My co-host on First Strike called it El Modelo. The Fighting with Numbers model is a predictive tool I built to evaluate a UFC matchup between fighters based on their actual in-cage performance data. I'm not basing it on hype. I'm not basing it on reputation. It's not what the sports books think. I actually try to run my model before I even look at the odds. Uh, it's a model that's looking at what the numbers inside the octagon are actually telling us. And I want to emphasize that as well, the octagon, because the data I have is only based on UFC fights. It is not based on any data prior to the UFC or any fights outside of the UFC, because these are stats that the UFC keeps. They're obviously the biggest promotion in the world, so they keep the best data in the world. Other promotions might keep it, but there's no consistency, right? So I keep with what's consistent. The octagon, the UFC, they have stats, and they're very good to look at. And with that said, I've been asked, do I skip fights on cards, or, how do I deal with varying strength of schedule? You know, with fighters, first of all, I need to have at least 3 fights worth of data in order to even run the model on a matchup between one fighter. One fighter has to have at least 3 fights of data to be entered into the model. Beyond that, I need to look at what those 3 fights are, because 3 fights that end in the first round or 3 fights that end in the second round, that doesn't add up to 45 minutes of cage time. And that's really what I'm looking at. That's really the meat of what I'm looking at, is around 45 minutes of cage time. If it comes close to those 45 minutes, I'd be willing to play with the idea of running that matchup. It's dependent on their opponent. There's a lot of variables. But yes, 3 fights worth of data, hopefully close to 45 minutes of cage time. They qualify for the model. If both fighters have that, we run it through the model. Thus, one of the reasons this week's card is so light. Not a lot of fighters have been around that long, at least 50% of that matchup. So, every fighter who runs through the model gets evaluated across a set of core metrics. As you're seeing here, I have on the screen Jasmine Jasudavicius versus Karine Silva. They face off this week. I'm not going to break it down as a fighter for fighter. I'm just going to talk about the model here. Look at the different metrics. Striking, significant strikes landed per minute, significant strikes absorbed per minute, striking differential, which, by the way, is the gap between what you're landing and what you're eating. There's head strike accuracy, knockdown scored, knockdown suffered, takedown volume, accuracy, and defense, clinch and ground control rates, submission attempts. And of course, at the very top, my personal favorite overall indicator is XR percentage, which stands for expected round win percentage. Yes, I understand. XR, expected. Okay, just put it together. Uh, XR percentage, I gotta say, it's one of my favorite tools I've found. It tells you how often a fighter is winning the rounds they compete in. That's really what it's telling you. So, for example, here on the screen, XR percentage for Jasmine Jasudavicius, 68%. She's winning rounds 68% of the time. It's a cleaner picture of consistency than win-loss records sometimes. A fighter can be 8-2 and still have a terrible XR percentage if they're scraping by on finishes after losing early rounds. Now, this isn't a piece of data I created. I got to thank Nate Latshaw. If you find him on Twitter, great UFC data guy as well. But he's responsible for XR percentages, and I got to thank him for providing these. But yeah, so if a fighter's just getting by on finishes in early rounds, sometimes that XR percentage can really show and dig deep, and it helps the model see through a record. Now, once all these metrics are put in, I have a weight system. I'm not going to explain what my weight system is, but I have a weight system for this. Now, strength of schedule and other metrics that may not be as easily quantifiable, right? Maybe a fighter's first round variance, maybe a fighter like Yuri Prohashka. These are all things that they're hard to measure, right? That a guy like Yuri Prohashka could walk in with a 52% XR percentage and still win fights, right? He is scraping by, and he was scraping by. Obviously, things changed last week, but for things like that, I also have a personal score that helps manage that weight system, because in all fairness, XR percentages can be held very highly against lower opponents, whereas a fighter may be fighting higher caliber opponents and their XR percentage is just a tick below. That helps the model balance those two fighters out and see them a little more evenly. But like I said, strength of schedule is a very tricky one. People have asked me multiple times how I measure strength of schedule. That's a very, very tricky one. I don't have an exact science to it. It's that one, you kind of got to go through the records and kind of just analyze it by yourself and determine whether or not it's worth weighing a fighter differently than the other based on what you see there. It's not just records either. A 10-0 fighter is not the same as every other 10-0 fighter. Dig deep into those records if you're looking at strength of schedule. Now, As I mentioned, once all that's in, the model spits out a win probability for me for both fighters, for each fighter in a given matchup. That number is what drives everything else, all the other decisions I make. Now, not every win probability is created equal. I got to say that. That's where my tier system comes into play. And that's something I had to test and play around with over and over until I realized, you know what? I need tiers for the scores I'm receiving. I need tiers for the win probabilities I'm getting. I need something to help me decide how much to bet, if I should bet it, and is this fighter actually strong enough to get this done for me? So, the tier system. Let's go over here to my dashboard, my season dashboard. As you can see, there's a performance by tier for each level. If there's a favorite, I've got 5 different tiers. Obviously, tier 1 is the best, tier 5 is the worst. Most of the time in the models, we're going to be looking at tier 1 and tier 5. That middle section is such a small window, and that's okay for me because I like knowing whether it's good or avoid. Those middle ones are very tricky, but let me explain real quick. Tier 1, like I said, the best elite favorites. Right now we're running 18-5 on elite favorites, which is good. That's a good number to have because they're favorites, so we got to make up the juice. But it's the model's highest confidence level. These are the fights where the numbers are clean, the sample size is sufficient, the edge is clear. The edge is clear. That's the most important part. When the model delivers a T1, I'm backing it most likely with a full unit, dependent on odds, of course. But more importantly, I guess I should say, tier 1 elite favorites is a fighter I am going to try and find a way to put on a betting slip somehow. If their odds are too big, even if there's an edge, if the odds are too big, let's find a method prop. Let's find some way to include this fighter on my betting slip. That's what that means. Now, if the odds are fair, yes, I'm putting a full unit on it. Occasionally, there is variance and there are variables that may cause me to put a smaller play or a half unit, but more times than not, tier 1 elite favorite is at least a full unit. Now, tier 2 strong favorites, I've actually haven't had any this year, but most likely that would just be a slightly smaller play. Tier 3 is a volatile favorite. I've had a couple of those this year, literally just 2. Um, that means there's still an edge. Tier 2 and tier 3 is kind of the same definition, but it means there's still an edge, but something might give me pause, right? Maybe the sample size is a little thin. Maybe there's crazy variables that I really can't account for quantifiably. Maybe there's a stylistic wild card the model doesn't fully capture, right? Maybe the confidence in the score is moderate rather than strong. Tatiana Suarez last week being a very good example. She was a tier 3 volatile favorite. I had a little bit of guard that Lupi Godinez could get her. Hey, she did hit her a little bit in that first round. These plays, these tier 3s, tier 2s, they might get a half unit or just a smaller play in general, depending on the odds, of course. Again, tier 4 fragile favorites, honestly, I try to stay away from those unless I'm desperate and maybe I need another leg somewhere, but they're not strong. I mean, I've only had 2 this year. They're 1-1. So honestly, more often than not, they are complete stayaways for me. Um, and then tier 5, trap favorites. That is the definition of my stayaways. It's exactly what it sounds like. The model might have a lean, it might have a small lean, might even have a clear lean, but the odds don't support the play. If the implied probability on the money line already exceeds what the model is projecting, there's no edge. And no edge means no bet. Doesn't matter how much I like the fighter. Doesn't matter how much hype is behind them. Doesn't matter if this is them finishing their story. I'm skipping it. I'm skipping it. If you've been listening to the podcast for a while, there are main events I just walk right past. I watch and I don't bet, and that's okay. Now, real quick, underdogs have only 3 tiers: live dog, puncher's chance, and dead dog. Yes, live dog is the best one. The last piece, the live dog label. This is probably my favorite, no pun intended. A live dog is where the model projects a fighter to win, sometimes with even strong confidence, most likely, and that fighter is being priced as an underdog by the book. That gap between what the model thinks and what the market thinks is where the value really lives. And live dogs are almost always plays for me. I mean, these are plus money, so I am playing them. And currently, tier 1s, I put a full unit on those dogs. Of course, that isn't 100% of the time. Always apply your own knowledge, though, to what the fighters are, right? Last week, another good example, Carlos Olberg. He was a live dog in my model, even when he was plus 110, of course. I took that bet, but I only did a half unit because I knew Yuri Prohashka is an absolute wild man and he is totally unpredictable. Now we still cash that live dog, but that's a reason to maybe not lay a full unit. But traditionally speaking, I'm laying a full unit on a live dog label. After that, puncher's chance and dead dog, I'm most likely skipping them altogether. It just means there isn't an edge there. Yes, it's an underdog. Yes, it's a plus price, and I'm sure it looks great on paper, but I'm probably skipping it. Depending on the odds, I may bet a puncher's chance tier two. Vicente Luque was a tier two underdog last week. Most likely, that's calling for half a unit, maybe a quarter unit, depending on the odds. So the goal every week is pretty simple. It, it's find the spots where the model disagrees with the market. That's it. Back those spots with discipline, protect the record when the edge isn't there, protect the bankroll when the edge isn't there. When you look at my model output every week, if you use this web app or if you see what I post online, now you kind of know like, oh, tier ones, I should follow that. And I'm not saying do or don't, do what you want with your bets. But, the model's 71% on the year. It's, I'm backing things with confidence and with discipline. And that's the point here. I'm not chasing action. I'm not trying to spray the fight card with method of props everywhere and trying to decide every single fight by method just to make a plus money slip. I've been positive nearly every single fight card. So why break what's not broken? Um, this model, its output is happening by knowing when to bet and knowing when to just watch the fights, right? But all right, take all that knowledge, put it in your brain, and let's apply it to this week's fight card for UFC Winnipeg. All right, I'm only hitting 2 fights this time. I want to save time. I thought I was going to be quicker on the model description, but I wanted to get some information across. I hope you guys enjoyed that. Let me know if you didn't. Let me know if you did. Whatevs. I only got 2 plays this week. Here we go. First up, Kyler Phillips versus Charles Jourdain. This one's a fun puzzle, I think I just said. Kyler Phillips, he's coming in on a 2-fight losing streak. Most recently, a decision loss to Vinicius Oliveira back in July. He's been in the UFC since 2020 and sits 6-3 overall in the promotion. Not awful, but definitely in need of a win again. The losing streak is a concern on the surface, of course, but the model doesn't just count wins and losses. Charles Jourdain, or Air Jourdain, which very clever, is on a 2-fight win streak with back-to-back submission victories. That's always slick. Most recently, he finished Dave Grant in November. He's been in the UFC since 2019, and he's sitting at 8-7-1 in the promotion. That's a little bit of a shaky record. The win streak gives him momentum, but the overall record tells a much longer story for this man. Phillips, he holds a 3-inch reach advantage at 72 inches, and the XR percentage picture is significant here. Kyler Phillips, 68% XR percentage. Jourdain down at 52. As we've mentioned and as we've started learning, the closer to 50% and below you're getting, the more red flags I got to give you. Charles is dangerously close to that 50% marker that I always flag. So what the number tells me is that Jourdain is getting himself into trouble in rounds, bailing himself out with the finishes. The submission wins are masking a round losing problem here. But hey, if he wins, that's still good. That's still good. You're okay, Charles. Now, Jourdain is absolutely a finisher. 6 total knockouts or submissions in the UFC. That's real. He's scored 7 knockdowns and has legitimate finishing power in both areas. But he's also been finished himself, and he's been knocked down 4 times in the UFC. Take that note. Kyler Phillips, on the other hand, has never been finished in the UFC. That's a durability note worth keeping in our back pocket. The striking is close. Phillip lands 4.95 significant strikes per minute with a 1.12 differential. Jourdain lands a bit more volume at 5.48 significant strikes per minute with a 1.23 differential. So he's also absorbing at a higher rate as he's dishing it. So he's taking in 4.25 significant strikes per minute compared to Phillips's 3.85. Both are efficient, but Phillips takes slightly less damage. Less damage is good. The grappling is where the gap kind of opens up here. Phillips holds a 61% control rate in the clinch and ground time with 19 takedowns at 45% accuracy, a 75% takedown defense. So Jourdain has only scored 4 takedowns, which is crazy for a guy who's a submission guy, and at 21% accuracy. So he's not getting to the ground on purpose, it seems like. And he defends takedowns at just 47%. He doesn't fear the ground, but he's also not controlling it. So his 8 submission attempts have turned into 4 submission wins. That tells you he can be dangerous if he gets there, but he's not the one putting himself there, as I mentioned. The model is very clear on this one. Let's hit the button. Boom. Hey, look at that. Kyler Phillips receives a 72.50% win probability. The model grades him as a tier 1 live dog. That is a full unit play for me. I already got him at plus 145 earlier in the week, but the line has moved. I'm sorry. I make my bets on Monday. It is what it is. Sorry. Deal with it. You can still find him around plus 120, though, as of now. At that price, he's still a live dog in the model and still a play. I will update the web app as the week goes with odds, and if it changes, it will grade it appropriately. Now, the model sees him winning nearly 3/4 of the time, and the book is still giving you plus money. That's my spot. That's my sweet spot. Kyler Phillips, I have it plus 145, plus 120. It is still a live dog. And here we go, main event time. And no, not the WrestleMania main events. Multiple, because it's 2 nights. Who do you guys think take it? Do we get new champs? 2 new champs, Randy Orton, Roman Reigns? Did you guys just turn off the pod because I brought up wrestling? My bad. Anyways, UFC Winnipeg, main event. Gilbert Burns, Mike Malott. Let's be real about what this main event is. Gilbert Burns was once one of the more dangerous welterweights on the planet. He challenged for the title back in 2021. He had Kamaru Usman hurt a little bit. You know, he was legitimate. And the losses he's taken since, they're not to scrubs, right? They're some of the best the division has to offer. But right now, Burns is on a 4-fight losing streak. Count them. 1, 2, 3, 4. He's 39 years old. 39 years old and on a 4-fight losing streak. Did I say it enough? His last fight was a TKO loss to Michael Morales nearly a year ago. So he's been away since May of 2025. And the numbers are reflecting a fighter in decline. They do. 53% XR percentage. He's nearly losing more rounds than he's winning. That's not who Gilbert Burns used to be. Now, across from him, Mike Malott, 34 years old, riding a 3-fight win streak. Much better to look at. Most recently, a decision win over Kellen Holland in October. He's the right age, the right momentum, the right numbers for this spot, most likely. XR percentages. Mike Malott, 78%, 53% for Burns, as I mentioned. That gap is significant. It's very significant. The striking tells a very similar story as well. Burns lands 3.15 significant strikes per minute with a negative 0.49 differential. He's eating more than he's landing in exchanges, and he's not landing a lot. Mike Malott lands 3.82 significant strikes per minute with a 1.07 differential. He's absorbing under 3 significant shots per minute. He's winning these exchanges very clean. The chin concern for Burns is also real. He's been knocked down 10 times. Not good. And that's just in the UFC, by the way. Mike Malott has not been knocked down even once in his 7 UFC fights. That's not a small detail when you're talking about a 39-year-old absorbing more shots than he's landing. These are the things you got to match together. Burns will bring some grappling pressure, 66% control rate in clinch and ground time, 42 takedowns scored in his career. Aggressive. That's still a weapon he has. But Mike Malott holds an 82% control rate in clinch and ground of his own, and his 57% takedown accuracy is significantly cleaner than Burns' 38, although he's only scored 8 takedowns so far. But you know, Malott's takedown defense is also very poor at 25%. I got to note that. But if Burns no longer has the output and pressure to consistently threaten the takedown, that number may not matter as much as it looks on paper. So we'll see. The model, run it, hit the button, boom. Mike Malott, it lands on him very clearly. Mike Malott, 65.81% win probability. Here's the problem and why it says on the screen, trap favorite. He's priced at minus 350. That implies a 77% win probability. The model only has him at 65%. The juice is completely swallowed the edge. The juice is not worth the squeeze. This is a stay away spot. Burns' toughness, his resume, and that submission threat he's carried throughout his career, it gives him enough live variables that I'm not comfortable finding a way to lay a number on Mike Malott, especially not at minus 350, 65% model score. It's just not confident enough to find a way to back him. Malott is the right side. He's the official prediction, but the bankroll isn't going anywhere near this one. And that is all I have for UFC Winnipeg. Yes, very short for this week, but you got a little bit of a teaching lesson at the front end. So short card, I have one strong play. That may be my only bet for this weekend. Who knows? One stay away. Actually, there's going to be more stay aways, but check out everything else to know what I've got. I've got 5 total fights modeled. We'll see how they look. Hopefully a little more clarity on how the model is making these calls every week in that first segment. So hope you enjoyed that. We're sitting at 45, 18, and 6 on the year, 71%. We're going to keep it rolling. We're going to keep protecting it. Quick reminder, the Fighting with Numbers web app is still out there. It's still available. If you want to check it out, just hit me up, DM me on Twitter, Instagram. You can try TikTok. I promise I will try to check it, especially my messages. Slide up in there. If you want an early look, hit me up. And we'll go from there. I'll send you the link. You can check it out. It's very straightforward, but I'm still working on it, which is why I'm not putting it out there. There's still little tweaks in there I find every single week. As always, follow me across all social medias at the Robbio. Links will be in the description. Full written breakdowns and model data. The rest of these fights will also live at fightnumbers.substack.com. On a normal basis, you can catch me on First Strike during the week from VSiN. Not this week, though. No episode, no co-host. So for more angles as the line develops, you can always check that show out, but you should check out VSiN anyways. But make sure you check me out. Make sure you like, subscribe to all my junk. I hope you guys love it. I hope you guys are enjoying it. I appreciate the kind words that have come my way over the last few days, over the last few weeks as well, especially with this web app. I think people are connecting with it a little bit better. Other ways for people to read all this nonsense that I put out there. So I appreciate everyone tuning in. If you haven't subscribed, make sure you do that. And one favor, share it with a friend this week. Share it with somebody. I know this isn't the best UFC week, but they should tune in now for when we get rolling. So we'll talk next time. Appreciate you.
Fight!